Hey guys, my name is Royce Hunt Bell. I'm the owner and operator of Roycycled Treasures. And today I just wanted to pop on and share a really quick, simple decoupage with you guys. We'll be using Roycycled Decoupage Paper today. The design I've chosen is Butterfly Floral. Roycycled Decoupage Papers are 18-pound paper, which means they're thicker than the tissue paper you buy for gift wrapping, but not as thick as, say, copy paper. The weight is really perfect for decoupaging. It's thin enough to disappear into your projects, but it's not as so fragile that it'll tear really easily. And so this is the design I'll be using today. I'll be using Wise Owl's paint and Antique Via. And to do my decoupage, I'll be using Wise Owl's 1 Hour Enamel. I use the 1 Hour Enamel to both decoupage and to seal my pieces. Before I get started though, I want to paint my surface white. You can see here I've already started. So let me squirt a little paint into my bowl and we'll finish getting this painted. I like to store my paint in squeeze bottles. When you dip your brush into your paint cans, you risk contaminating your cans. Your brushes often carry debris and or bacteria that you can deposit into your can, and then when you seal your can and put it back on the shelf, that bacteria can grow and ruin your paint. So I always squirt into another vessel and then I paint out of it. I'm using a Klingon F50 brush, and this is a Klingon brush. It's a flat brush. I love the synthetic bristles because they give me a nice smooth finish. You guys will see that I'm just doing a really quick coat. You don't even need full coverage, and you can use white primer if you want for this process as well. I just want to put down a nice base coat so that the design on my tissue paper will pop off of the surface. When the paper gets wet, it becomes somewhat transparent. So if you decoupage over a darker surface, it's not horrible, but your design may not be as prevalent as it would be if you decoupaged over a lighter surface. Just a little more paint. If I would sprayed my surface with water first, this paint would have gone a lot further. But you guys can see how awesome the coverage is with this one quick coat from Wise Owl's paint. I love the transformative property of decoupaging. You can take something as plain as this wooden square and make it into something absolutely delightful with just this one quick process. I don't want to lay down too much paint because I don't want to have to wait forever for it to dry, guys. Just one more area and we're almost done. Just a little bit more paint. And again, I'm not looking to get complete, full, perfect coverage. I just want to lay down a nice foundation so that my artwork from my decoupage paper really pops. When I'm painting, I always stick my brush into water when I'm done. When you make investments into brushes, you want to make sure and take care of them. So here you guys see, it's a white surface. It's not completely, the coverage is not complete, but that's okay. My next step is I'm going to use Wise Owl's 1 Hour Enamel, which I also keep in squeeze bottles. So I'm going to squeeze a little bit of the 1 Hour Enamel into my bowl. I'm going to squeeze out about what I think I need. I can always put more, right? The brush I'm going to be using today is one of Wise Owl's brushes. This is a micro edge brush, and it's called the micro edge because when it's wet, the edge is literally micro thin, which I love this brush for cutting in. I hate taping off, but I also love it for decoupage. First, I need to figure out what part of the design I want on my piece. These papers are big, and so it's going to be larger than my project. Now that my surface is all dry, we're ready to decoupage. I'll be using Wise Owl's 1 Hour Enamel with Wise Owl's micro edge brush to do my decoupage. This is my favorite decoupage brush, you guys. But first, before we get started, I have to figure out what part of the design that I want to use, right? because this sheet is much larger than my project. And I'm thinking that I'm loving this bloom right here. And so I'm going to really concentrate on the bloom. And if I scoot it over just a little bit, I can even have this butterfly and this one, which will both be off center or off edge, which will be fine. So once you decide where you're going to cut and how you're going to lay your paper, I always like to trim off the extra paper. No sense battling with the whole sheet of paper while you're trying to decoupage this one part of your project. I'm going to trim about 1/2 inch past where I think I'm going to need my paper. And even though I cut a portion of my butterfly, I still have one and some blooms to use for another project later. So we'll set that aside. And let's start with this one. I probably could have saved that butterfly altogether. It's okay. So once I decide where I'm going to put my paper, I'm going to start with my decoupage. Now, you guys are looking at this piece and you're thinking it's so big, how is she going to decoupage this without getting wrinkles? The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm only going to decoupage a part at a time. I'm not going to decoupage this whole thing at once. If I were to cover this entire thing with product and then try to cover the paper, it would be a hot mess, y'all. We don't want to do that. So this is where I want my paper to lay, and I know this is how I want my design to be. So now I can simply fold my paper back and I'm going to decoupage a portion at a time. I'm probably going to do this in thirds since it's a larger project. Look, I already moved it. Now I got to figure it again. I'm going to roll it back this way. That way I can anchor the other edge down and then I can roll it back the other way. So I'm just going to take my 1-hour enamel. I'm using it 1-hour enamel in matte, but it's also available in satin and gloss. And so I'm just going to spread this over the edge of my piece. I don't want it to be too wet. I don't want to have puddles of product on my piece, right? But I want to lay down enough product so that my paper adheres to the surface. I always like to look on the side to make sure that I don't leave any blank areas. If you have an area where there's not enough product and you lay down your paper, those will be the places where you'll have bubbles later. So you want to make sure that you get nice full coverage. Now that my product is down, I'm going to lay my paper down and I'm going to rub out. So any air bubbles that are under my paper are going to get rubbed out of the edge of my piece of wood. If you find that you're not able to manipulate your paper successfully with just your hands, there's a cheat. You can use a piece of plastic or a piece of saran wrap to use to rub your paper down. Because this has zero traction, you can manipulate your paper a little more without running the risk of tearing your tissue. You still want to be cautious because it is wet tissue. I'm not going to worry about trying to get all the wrinkles out because I know when the paper dries, it's going to shrink and a lot of those wrinkles are going to disappear anyways. So now that I've anchored my edge, I can roll my paper back this way and I can continue doing it piece by piece until I've covered the entire board. A board like this can be used as a tray for an ottoman or for your island in your kitchen. It would be beautiful. You can put feet on it and have it be a stand. Again, I'm making sure that I have full coverage. I'm looking on the side to make sure I don't have any dry patches in the middle so I don't have bubbles later. And then I'm going to take my paper, and now because this is the edge, I'm going to rub it out this way. Again, I'm going to use my saran wrap to go in, and I just want to use this to make sure that there's good contact between the paper and the board. And this is really going to decrease the odds of there being wrinkles after it dries fully. And we have one more section. A little bit more of the 1 hour enamel to finish. Now you guys will notice when I'm laying down my product, I don't start next to the paper. I don't want to leave a glob of product right on the paper because it'll seep through and you'll see that on the top. So I always unload my brush away from the paper. And then after I've unloaded the product off of the brush, then I can go underneath the paper and lay down some more product. Again, I'm going to look from the sides and make sure that I don't have any blank areas or dry areas where I didn't put enough product or any product at all. I've had that happen before. I've missed a complete spot. Especially when you're working on wood, because wood can absorb product differently in different areas. Now that I have my product down, I just go back over with my hands and continue until it's all adhered. I'm going to go back in with my piece of saran wrap and just make sure there's good contact between the paper and the surface of my piece. And again, I'm not worried about wrinkles because I know that the majority of them will work their way out as the paper dries and shrinks. Let's let this dry and we'll come back and trim the edges in a few. Now that my piece is all dry, we can trim the edges. You can trim the edges when the paper is wet, but you really want to be careful because you don't want to tear the paper. So in order to make sure that I get a nice clean edge without having to be perfect to trim my paper ahead of time, what I do is I simply sand the edges off at the end using a sanding block with about a 220 grit. You don't want to use anything lower than that because then you risk tearing your edges. Unless, of course, you're going for a rustic look, then that will work. So using my sanding block, I'm going to sand straight down on my piece. I'm not going to go side to side because I risk tearing my paper. I'm not going to go up and down because when I go up, I risk lifting the paper. So my sanding block, when I take it, I go straight down. And it trims my paper perfectly all the way around without my having to trim it perfectly prior to starting my decoupage. See that edge? Perfectly trimmed. So I'm going to go all the way around and just trim this paper, and it's going to come right off and it's going to be perfectly trimmed. I'll finish trimming this. I'll be right back. Now that I'm done trimming, I simply remove the extra and I'm left with this beautiful tray that I can use. I can put bun feet on it, I can put handles on it, but see how quick and easy it was to transform this plain piece of wood into something special. Now, depending on the use of this piece, will determine how I seal this. I'm going to seal this with a layer of 1 hour enamel. It's the same product that I use to decoupage that I'm now going to use to seal this piece. I'll probably use 2 coats since I'm more than likely going to make this into a tray. I am simply brushing my sealer right over the top. Now, when I brush on my sealers, I may get some puckering and some wrinkles, but you know what? I'm going to completely ignore them because I know that when my paper dries completely, those are going to simply go away. I tell people this all the time and they do not believe me. But I promise if you walk away and leave it alone, when you come back after it's completely dry, those buckles and wrinkles will be gone. And that's it. Look how quick and easy it was to transform this piece. Now, if I wanted, I could add additional things on top of this. I could use stamps and I could stamp a word or a saying on here. I could use transfers on here. I could use anything on top of this if I wanted to add more decor to this. But for now, she's done. Thank you guys so much for joining me. If you're interested in these products, please take a look in my bio. All of the Wise Owl products that I used today are available on my website. And I also have a link where you guys can find retailers who carry the Roycycled Decoupage paper. Thank you. You guys have a blessed day.